Is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Tonight, reporting from Washington.
Good evening. We begin once again in China, where intrigue is the order of the day, where political and military loyalties are being tested deep in the shadows, where rumor far outweighs fact. Tonight, there is a hint of what may be happening, but only a hint. Radio Beijing has suggested that a man named Qiao has replaced Zhao Zheng as the head of the Communist Party. There was a telegram sent by the Supreme People's Court which has congratulated Qiao and the other members of the Politburo for suppressing what they call the counter-revolutionary riots. Qiao, among other things, is in charge of internal security, but that is about all we know politically. Tonight, the Chinese military is moving about in the Beijing region. The men who are actually at the top of the Chinese government are nowhere to be seen. The American government is largely in the dark, and Americans in China are trying to leave. We'll go first to Beijing and ABC's Jim Laurie.
There were repeated outbreaks of gunfire during the night and day Tuesday, with further reports of civilian casualties. The belief became more widespread that contending military units could soon be doing battle in the capital. Troops feeling the 27th Army, which brutally occupied Tiananmen Square, had tarnished the Army's image, were said to be ready to act. Still, nothing could be confirmed. The streets of Beijing this day had an eerie feeling, the scars of the weekend battles still obvious. But while all state stores were closed, private merchants did a brisk business. Meanwhile, the Chinese propaganda machine has been put into high gear. Nationwide state television has shown this version of the weekend's events. People stoning an Army transport truck, seriously wounding or killing its driver as the rest of the convoy rolls on. The government seeks to blame pro-democracy students and so-called hooligans for provoking the military response. But the time displayed on the official police video shows the civilian attacks on the Army were carried out hours after the military had begun their random killings. A government spokesman boasted the Army met initial success in quelling the counter-revolutionary riots. He also provided the first official casualty figures: 300 killed, mostly Army, 5,400 military, either wounded or missing. The government listed only 23 students killed. Red Cross estimates had put deaths in the thousands, with the majority students and innocent bystanders. An Army general spoke of the restraint soldiers had shown. This photo shows just the reverse. Whatever the propaganda or the possible conflicts in the Army, among the people in the capital, the only thing certain was fear and uncertainty itself. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Beijing.
There are reports circulating here in Washington tonight that the ranking members of the Chinese Politburo, the ruling inner circle, have left the capital for the increased safety of a military compound in a western suburb of Beijing. And that is another report which may prove incredibly difficult to confirm. On the general subject of reports and rumors, here's our Beijing bureau chief, Todd Carroll.
Unofficial notices plastered around town and word of mouth have become the main sources of information here, and the rumor mill is going full tilt. For 2 days now, people have been saying Premier Li Peng, the hardliner blamed for the military assault, has been shot, though not seriously hurt. Today, a Hong Kong newspaper said Li had been shot by a guard whose relatives had been killed in the violence. Then the guard was shot dead. The official media has said nothing about it. Knowledgeable sources say the report is hard to believe. It also has been rumored that Deng Xiaoping, China's top leader, is dead. The frail 84-year-old Deng was last seen in public 3 weeks ago, meeting Mikhail Gorbachev. A government spokesman says reports of Deng's death were fabricated. It is widely believed that Deng suffers from prostate cancer. ABC News has learned that one doctor who has seen Deng believes he has only months to live. There are rumors, too, about the fate of Zhao Ziyang, the head of the party and prime target of an inter-party purge. Some rumors say he is dead, others that he is in South China under the protection of the local army. Chinese sources tell ABC News Zhao may now be held under house arrest. Until China's leaders appear in public again, it will be hard to put all the rumors to rest. Todd Carroll, ABC News, Beijing.
It is perfectly possible that this jockeying for power may go on for days, and there is no more difficult society for the United States to penetrate than China. Here's ABC's John McCarthy.
The U.S. government studies the troop and tank movements in the streets of Beijing just like reporters do. And when U.S. officials say the Chinese military appears to be bitterly divided, this is how they make that assessment. For several days, officials have seen Chinese tanks positioned as though they were expecting to do battle with other tanks, not with demonstrators. There were also intercepts of radio conversations between units and their commanders showing sharp disagreements about what they were doing. There were also U.S. contacts within the Chinese military itself, which seemed to confirm the depth of the division. So the U.S. does have some decent intelligence about what is happening on the inside of the Chinese military, but the same cannot be said for the struggle that is going on inside the leadership. Peter?
John, how many contacts do we have inside the actual bureaucracy of the Chinese government? There are all sorts of department-to-department relationships.
Well, the U.S. government has been having some contacts with the foreign ministry, with the military, and the education department, and the indications are that very little is going on inside that bureaucracy now.
John, I made the point that the political leadership is nowhere to be seen. There are some rumors of a secret Politburo meeting on Sunday night.
Peter, there were some limousines seen moving from the leadership compound on Sunday night after the massacre in Tiananmen Square. Officials are speculating that could have been a Politburo meeting, but there is no apparent outcome.
Okay, John McCarthy at the State Department. Let's go over to the Pentagon and talk to ABC's Bob Zelnick, because there are a lot of reports, as we hinted at the top, about the Chinese military moving around. Bob, how much do we really know?
Peter, according to U.S. intelligence, there are elements of at least 8 Chinese armies. That's 350,000 men, or roughly 10 times the normal area in the immediate vicinity of Beijing. And they are deployed against each other, from all we can tell. The conservative government can count on the support of forces brought in from outside the Beijing area. There's, of course, the 27th Army from Inner Mongolia, which is widely held responsible for many of the worst atrocities of this past weekend. In addition, intelligence says that an airborne army from Wuhan has been brought in toward the capital, along with another army from Shenyang in Manchuria. Now, deployed against this are, of course, the 38th Army, which refused to execute many of the martial law orders against the protesting students. There are 3 other armies normally in the Beijing region which appear more loyal to the 38th, and there's the 66th Army from nearby Tianjin, which is also considered pro-reform.
Stop for a sec, Bob. All the numbers, but can we get any sense whether or not there is a real sense of overwhelming loyalty to one side or the other, and more importantly, whether or not at the Pentagon they really think the Army will have a go at it?
Peter, the easiest thing to say is that at this moment there's no hard intelligence that clashes have occurred. All there are projections, and the projections are that, as has been suggested, many military leaders were appalled by the brutality of this past weekend, and if the regime attempts to order them against civilians again, there will likely be clashes between various military armies and possibly an outbreak of civil war.
Okay, Bob Zelnick of the Pentagon, thank you very much. Just perhaps one other point here, a couple of other points, but one certainly. As much as anything, it is the fact that we cannot see the political leadership in China, which leads people to think there is chaos. Even in China, the government which is in charge would surely indicate it to the people in some fashion. The Chinese dissident, Feng Lizhe, has taken refuge in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. Feng, you may remember, was the man that the Chinese police prevented from meeting with President Bush when the president was in China last February. And here in Washington today, the Justice Department followed through on the steps that President Bush said he was taking in light of events in China today. Attorney General Richard Thornburg announcing that visas for 73,000 Chinese students and almost 250,000 non-students have been automatically extended for 1 year. China today, as much as we know. In a moment, the State Department's advice to Americans in Beijing: get out. And later in our broadcast, some of the day's other news: Congressman Tom Foley replaces Jim Wright as Speaker of the House. And in Iran, the tumult of